Welcome to the Immigrantinlaw channel. Today, we will examine the facts about which European Union countries tightened their migration policies in 2026 and why this happened. These changes affect both EU laws as a whole and the national measures of individual states. No speculation, only verified data. In 2025-2026, the European Union effectively agreed on a set of measures to tighten migration and asylum policies, which will take effect in 2026. These changes are part of the Pact on Migration and Asylum, an updated set of European laws aimed at strengthening migration control, speeding up application procedures, and making it easier to return people who don't have the right to stay in the EU. These rules, approved by the European Parliament and the Council of the EU, are set to come into force by June 2026. The main changes include simplifying asylum rejections and speeding up return procedures. EU interior ministers have agreed to revise the rules to allow countries to reject asylum applications more quickly if they do not meet the criteria for international protection, and to initiate return procedures for rejected applicants more quickly. This is part of a broader reform of the EU's migration and asylum system aimed at managing migration flows more effectively. Approval of a common list of safe countries of origin at EU level. The EU Council has agreed to create the first common list of countries recognized as safe for the purposes of the asylum procedure. This means that applications from citizens of these countries will be processed under accelerated procedures, and in case of rejection, returns will be carried out more quickly, as these countries are considered to provide standard protection of fundamental rights. The initial list includes countries such as Bangladesh, Colombia, Egypt, India, Kosovo, Morocco, and Tunisia. Creation of return centers outside the EU, so-called return hubs. Part of the agreed package of measures provides for the possibility of placing migrants whose status for staying in the EU has not been confirmed or has been rejected in special centers in third countries or outside European territory until their return or the consideration of their status is completed. This decision is supported by most EU countries as a way to reduce the burden on asylum systems in the European Union and speed up deportation processes. These changes reflect a clear trend in the EU towards tightening migration policy, particularly in terms of speeding up procedures, strengthening external border controls, and increasing the efficiency of returning migrants who have been denied asylum. All measures are aimed at making the migration system more manageable and compatible with the interests of member states. In 2025, Austria officially notified the European Commission of the extension of temporary controls at the internal borders of the Schengen area until June 2026. These controls involve checks at the borders with a number of neighboring EU countries, in particular Hungary and Slovenia, as well as additional controls on certain routes. The reason for the extension is the continuing pressure of irregular migration and the need to prevent secondary movements within the EU. The Austrian authorities have stated that the measures are aimed at limiting illegal entry, combating the transport of migrants through the country's territory, reducing the burden on the national asylum system, increasing internal security. It is important to emphasize that under the Schengen Borders Code, states have the right to temporarily reintroduce internal border controls in the event of a serious threat to public order or internal security. However, such measures are considered an exception to the principle of free movement. Austria has been applying internal border controls since 2015, regularly extending them. The extension until mid-2026 confirms that the country continues to take a stricter approach to migration policy compared to the pre-war Schengen period. In practice, this means that travelers crossing borders within the EU may be subject to random checks of their documents and vehicles, despite the formal absence of internal borders in the Schengen area. In 2025, Slovenia decided to extend temporary controls at its internal border with Croatia. These measures were introduced in accordance with the provisions of the Schengen Borders Code and are regularly extended when there are threats to public security. The reasons for this were an increase in irregular migration along the so-called Balkan route, an increase in the number of illegal border crossings, the need for coordination with neighboring EU countries. Although Croatia has been part of the Schengen area since 2023, Slovenia has reserved the right to carry out selective checks on transport and documents. This means that formally, the borders within Schengen remain open, but in practice, additional control measures may be applied. In addition, the Slovenian authorities have strengthened cooperation with the European External Border Agency Frontex and increased the number of patrols in border areas. The measures are aimed at preventing secondary movements of migrants deeper into the EU. It is important to note that Slovenia has not announced its withdrawal from the European Solidarity Mechanism for sharing responsibility for asylum in 2026. However, the country is demonstrating a stricter approach to controlling movements within the Schengen area. Thus, in 2026, Slovenia has not radically changed its asylum legislation, but continues to tighten its border regime within the permissible EU rules. In February 2026, the Swedish government announced plans to change the residence arrangements for asylum seekers. The plan is to introduce mandatory accommodation in state reception centers for the entire period of case processing. The initiative was presented as part of a broader policy of tightening migration legislation, which the current government has been pursuing since 2022. The new rules are aimed at strengthening control over the whereabouts of applicants and reducing the number of cases where people disappear from the system before a decision is made on their case. Details of the initiative. Mandatory residence in designated accommodation centers is being introduced. The freedom to choose one's own accommodation for the period of consideration of the application is to be restricted. Refusal to comply with the conditions of residence may affect the consideration of the case. Persons who violate the requirements may be required to report regularly to the migration authorities. The goal is to improve the manageability of the asylum system and reduce the number of people remaining in the country after being refused. The authorities explain the measures as necessary to strengthen control over migration flows and improve the effectiveness of procedures for returning those who have been refused. It is also emphasized that the rules are aimed at ensuring equal accommodation conditions and a more transparent system. In effect, this means a transition to a more centralized model for receiving asylum seekers. Compared to previous years, when some applicants were allowed to live outside state centers, the new model significantly restricts the freedom to choose a place of residence for the period of consideration of the application. Thus, in 2026, Sweden continues to tighten its migration policy, emphasizing control and manageability of the asylum system. From June 12, 2026, a revised set of European rules will come into force, the Pact on Migration and Asylum, approved by the EU institutions in 2024, with a transition period for implementation. This package of regulations is binding on all member states and is designed to change the way the asylum system works at the European level. The Pact includes the reform of several regulations and introduces a more rigorous and unified model of migration management. It aims to distributing responsibility among countries. A permanent solidarity mechanism is introduced, whereby states are required to participate in burden sharing, accepting applicants, financial contributions, or technical support. Reducing the time taken to process applications. Accelerated procedures are established for applicants from countries with low asylum recognition rates. Strengthening control at the EU's external borders. Mandatory preliminary screening at the border is introduced. Identity, security, and registration checks in EU databases before formal admission to the asylum procedure. Expanding opportunities for border procedures. Some applications can be examined directly at the border or in transit zones without full admission to the country. One of the key elements is the reform of the Dublin system, which previously determined the responsibility of the country of first entry. The new redistribution mechanism is designed to reduce the burden on EU external border states. The Pact also provides for a faster procedure for returning rejected persons, and countries are committed to increasing the actual level of enforcement of deportation decisions. In effect, this means a transition from a fragmented system, where states often acted differently, to a more centralized and standardized model. In 2026, the EU will officially begin operating under new rules that make the asylum system more rigid, structured, and controlled. In addition to the countries already mentioned, other European Union countries are also taking a stricter approach to migration policy in 2025-2026. Czech Republic, the country's government supported the pan-European reform of the Migration and Asylum Pact and advocated for strengthening mechanisms for returning rejected applicants. The Czech Republic has traditionally taken a cautious stance on the mandatory distribution of migrants and insists at the EU level on the priority of protecting external borders and expedited application review procedures. Estonia participates in the EU Solidarity Mechanism, but emphasizes the limited capacity of its national reception system. The country focuses on strengthening controls and supports the pan-European policy of accelerating returns. Estonia consistently advocates for tougher measures to prevent illegal migration. Bulgaria. As an EU external border state, Bulgaria continues to strengthen border controls and border security infrastructure. In 2025-2026, the country increased coordination with the European agency Frontex and is investing in technical equipment for the border. Bulgaria also supports tightening up application procedures and speeding up the return of persons without the right to stay. Denmark. Although Denmark has a special status within EU justice and home affairs policy, it remains one of the countries with the strictest national migration legislation. In recent years, Danish policy has focused on reducing the number of new asylum applications and tightening the requirements for obtaining protection status. Denmark's approach is often considered one of the strictest in Europe. Thus, the trend toward tightening is not limited to one or two countries. In 2026, there is a general trend in different parts of the EU towards tighter controls, faster procedures, and more efficient returns. The tightening of migration policy in 2025-2026 is due to several main reasons. Political factor. In a number of countries, parties advocating stricter migration controls have gained ground. This has influenced national legislation and the general course of government policy. Security issues. States are seeking to reduce illegal border crossings, strengthen controls at the EU's external borders, and improve the efficiency of returning persons who have been denied asylum. Pressure on reception systems. The increase in the number of applications in previous years has led to an overload of migration services in some countries, which has been used as an argument for speeding up procedures and revising rules. As a result, in 2026, the EU is betting on a more rigid, structured, and controlled model of migration policy. Thus, 2026 will be a turning point for the European Union's migration policy. At the EU level, the Pact on Migration and Asylum will come into force, a unified system that speeds up application review procedures, introduces a mandatory solidarity mechanism between countries, and strengthens control at external borders. At the same time, individual states are taking their own measures. Austria and Slovenia are extending internal border controls. Sweden is tightening residence rules for asylum seekers. The Czech Republic, Estonia, Bulgaria, and Denmark support the policy of speeding up returns and strengthening controls. It is important to understand that this does not mean a complete closure of Europe. It means a transition to a more rigid, structured, and managed system. Procedures are becoming faster, requirements stricter, and controls more centralized. If you are planning to move to the EU, apply for asylum, or seek long-term legalization, 2026 requires particularly careful analysis of each country's legislation. Leave a request for a free consultation with Immigrantinlaw lawyers. We will select the optimal relocation strategy for you, prepare all the necessary documents, explain the nuances of the legislation in detail, and answer all your questions. We will analyze your case, your goals, and your situation without templates. Want to learn more or start the process today? Contact us. All contact details are listed in the description below this video. We are here to help you take a confident step towards a new life. Like, subscribe to the channel, and ask your questions in the comments. I will be happy to answer them. Discover a world of opportunities with Immigrant in Law.